I've got no goals. I've got no ambitions whatsoever. We launched the video and it went to 8.5 million, generated $12 million of sales in 10 months. If you don't know what you're doing it for, you'll find it very difficult to build wealth. All of the decisions that we make on a daily basis slightly influenced by people by not actually aligning it with what you want. We're the only species that believe in money, so there's only one way to get money, and that's from another human. But the beauty of having a business that's aligned with who you are is you'll earn more money doing that than you will doing something you don't want to do. If you don't take risks, you're really going to have a very mediocre life. Financial freedom is as simple as trying to lose weight.
Jason, thank you so much for joining us today.
Pleasure.
I would love to start from the beginning. So you grew up watching bailiffs knocking on your family's door on a council estate. And right now you live in West Sussex on a farm, financially free by the age of 30. Can you tell me what decision sat between those two versions of your life and how did everything begin to change?
Yeah, I mean, I was really young when we was on the estate, and I didn't see bailiffs knocking on the door, but I heard them hiding behind the sofa, pretending we wasn't in and stuff. Um, I think they say that your character or your values are shaped by the time you're 7, and I think whatever you perceive to be missing most in that time, you value the highest. So if you have the perception of a void in your life, such as security, you will value security, right? So as I went through adolescence and my teenage years and then into work, I naturally wanted to create more and more security. Money wasn't really the thing. I found out that money provides security, but really what I was chasing is just security. I wanted stabilization. I wanted no chaos. I wanted balance, and I wanted to know where my things were and have safety and security. So I think the decision was to just use my means, my knowledge, my resources, my money to just create as much security as I can. And, obviously that led to making wise choices around how to use money and things like that.
Speaking of security, you actually quit a safe career when your first child was born, which most people would say that is a very bad timing to take a risk. Why did you do exactly the opposite?
Yeah, I don't know if there's such thing as a safe career, to be honest. There's not a safe career, especially today. We're about to see a lot of safe careers go down the pan. I think it was a back against the wall moment where it's like, if I have no plan B, then I have to make it work. I kept talking about starting my own business. I kept talking about being financially free, whatever that meant at the time. And I think we were sitting there, around Christmas time. We found out we were going to have a baby. I was 22 when we found out I was going to have a baby. I was 23 when he was born. And it was like, when would be the worst time to let's do it now because I'll have to do it. There's no alternative. There's no plan B.
No, or never.
Yeah. It really drove. And having my son drove me.
That was a switch, a mental switch for you.
Definitely. Yeah. It was just a rocket up my backside.
I see.
I wasn't doing it for me anymore. I was doing it for them, not just my son, but for his mum as well. So, and again, because my values were so high on security, think about my dad left before I was, 2. My idea of what stable security and a great family was the opposite of what I had. So because I valued that so much, I was almost overly driven to make sure that worked, because I didn't want what I didn't have. I didn't want him to have what I had growing up.
Speaking of building a business, you say that building your dream career actually comes from knowing exactly what you want from the start, which I think that most people know what they fear, not what they want. How can they switch their focus?
I think, I ask people all the time, what do you want? And they say freedom. And I say, what does freedom mean? And they say, I just want to do whatever I want, whenever I want, with whoever I want, And I say, okay, well, what do you want? And they go, I don't know. Because they haven't, so they don't even know the first bit, they don't know what they want to do. And the reason they don't know what they want to do is because they're looking up to other people. They're trying to please and appease mum and dad. They're trying to please and appease the masses and, the norm. And our decisions are influenced by what we think we should be doing all the time, when really we rarely get to grips with our own values and what we actually love and what inspires us. And I think it's much easier to create an income or a vocation from something that you enjoy, rather than doing something you hate and then trying to become financially free on the side.
True that.
It's really difficult to do that. Um, if you can go into a job where it doesn't feel like a job, then you're free anyway, right? If you could just wake up every day and do something you would love to do anyway, it doesn't, that is freedom. And then the financial piece is just how much time you can have off if you need to, right? Because you don't actually want to at that point. So it's all good saying that, but a lot of people are pushed into jobs because we're impressionable as kids. You are led by your parents. My dad, my stepdad, when I was learning to drive, I said, shall I learn in an automatic car or a manual car? And he said, well, just learn in a manual because then you can drive both. And I thought, okay, I didn't really question it. I hate driving, right? And I've driven an automatic car ever since I passed my test, and all cars are automatic now, right? They're all going automatic, right? So I know that's kind of a silly little story, but there's a tiny little bit of resentment there that goes, well, it cost me more to pass my test because it took me longer. It took more of my time to pass my test. And I don't even like it. I just did it because he said it. And I just took that like face value. Whereas if I'd questioned it a bit, I would have gone, no, do you know what? I don't actually like driving. I want the easiest route to drive a car. I don't want to drive a manual car. So that's one decision. Imagine all of the decisions that we make on a daily basis slightly influenced by people by not actually aligning it with what you want, but instead just going along with you're going to end up, you think you end up here, but you end up here in life. And then you're like, well, this isn't quite what I envisaged or what I imagined. And you see this a lot with people, specifically in doctors, accountants, lawyers, who have been pushed in by their parents into that direction. And they realize at 35, 38, 40 years old, this is not inspiring to me. This is not serving me well. And that's when they try and reverse engineer their life to do what they always should have done. Well, if you'd just done that in the first place, you'd have a much different outcome.
We are so unconsciously pushed on a path as we grow up, and we very rarely challenge what people tell us growing up. So how can someone go on this path of self-discovery to actually find out what they want from an early age?
Yeah, I think knowing who you are is like the master key. And the way that, without going into too much detail, I think that some great things that you can do is just ask yourself some questions. Like, if I was to ring your friends up and ask them who you're the go-to person for, who are you the reliable person for? In what area are you the most reliable? What would you bring up in conversation? If I asked them what you always bring up in conversations, what would they tell me? That there's some clues there as to what your soul is, what you really are inspired by. If you didn't need money and you woke up on Monday morning, what's the first thing that you would choose to go and do? What do you bring up in conversation most? What do you try and change conversations to when you're out with your friends? And then another great thing is if you look through your camera roll on your phone, and you just flick through all the photos, there'll be a common theme of things that you are inspired to take photos of. It might be animals, it might be kids, it might be mountains, it might be music, it might be whatever, right? But it might be art, but there'll be some common themes there. And if you combine the answers to all those questions, there'll be a kind of a thread as to who you truly are. What is inspiring to you, and whatever that is, you can monetize. You can serve people in that area, and already that doesn't feel like work.
To have a better understanding about money and work and what actually makes you feel good to do in order to get to financial freedom, what's a belief that people currently have about money that really keeps them stuck and it actually doesn't get them to the next level?
I think money is overcomplicated. Money is a unit it's a medium for fair exchange. So, before there was money, if I had a broken zip, and you were great at tapestry, I could say, can you fix my zip? And you might say to me, oh yeah, great. I'll fix your zip because when my mum needs open heart surgery, you can perform that because you've learnt that. Well, it's not quite the same. It's not quite the same value, is it? You're just, anyone can learn how to do this. No, not everyone can learn how to do open heart surgery. So there had to be a way of kind of measuring the value that people are willing to give to others, to serve others, right? And money is that. So we're the only species that believe in money. So there's only one way to get money, and that's from another human. And there's two ways to get it. You either serve them and give them something of fair value and they pay you, or you beat them at a skill, using it like a competitive environment, like a poker, sports, trading, all that kind of stuff. So people overcomplicate money. That's one. And the other thing is exchanging time for money, so an hourly rate, committing to, well, if I work for 8 hours, you pay me X amount of pounds. Because if you do that, and you see this mistake, when people try to start their own businesses and charge an hourly rate, what they do is they realize very quickly that they run out of hours, and then there's a cap, but the work doesn't cap. So the work just grows, the hours stop, and then they have a breakdown. So time for money is probably the biggest kind of misconception around people starting to use money to build an income, I think.
Yeah, I think this is the dilemma of every entrepreneur running a startup.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
hit that ceiling very, very
course.
quickly with your time, and then you need to take yourself out of that equation to actually be able to keep on growing with either a
Yeah.
team or
Delegation is that, like, if you can't do delegation, you'll never be free, no matter how much money you've got. You
True.
really won't, because you'll always need to show up to do something.
And speaking of free, so if financial freedom comes after mental freedom,
Mhm.
how do you tell someone to shift from just wanting financial results into actually changing their mindset first?
Yeah, mental freedom is first, because if you're not mentally free, then you don't know who you are, or you're holding on to some kind of memory baggage that's stopping you from taking calculated risks or actions that you need to be successful financially. A lot of that is shame and guilt a lot of the time. But also, if you don't know who you are, then, like, I'll give you an example. I've met people who were born into wealth. Like, they've got all the money in the world to do whatever they want. They've got rich parents and what have you, and yet they're drug addicts because they're kind of lost. They've got no sense of purpose. They're just directionless. They're trying their hand at trying to force businesses to work because they're trying to make them feel good, when really they're not doing anything that is meaningful to them. So because they don't know who they are. So I think mental freedom is knowing who you are, making sure that you're letting go of anything that's holding you back. And I'll give you an example. A lot of the time we, I think, hold on to emotions that are in a very inefficient way. For example, if you walk into a house and find your partner cheating on you one day, right? At that moment in time, you're a victim. It's happening to you, and you have a fear of dating. Maybe you have a trust issue for a while, and then it's the worst thing that happened to you in the world. And then 20 years later, I bump into you in the high street, and I say, was that the worst thing that happened to you? And you say, no, it's the best thing, because I met this person and we had these kids and I traveled the world and we did this and I built this life, right? So it went from the worst thing to the best thing. So it was just a thing that happened, and it took you 20 years to see the positives, right? So if you could just see the positives in the moment, and I think it's a great skill to have, to force yourself to try and see lessons immediately in something that happens that you perceive to be negative. And when you do that, you release, like, you become liberated from, there's nothing that can kind of bring you down. If you can put yourself in that position, then you can start focusing on financial freedom.
I agree about this, especially from a growth perspective.
Uh-huh.
I think being stuck in the moment with things that you think that they are such a major problem really keeps you from growing.
Victim.
Exactly. A victim mindset can very rarely pivot because you don't see any other
Don't
options.
see any other options.
While a lot of the times I've tried to train myself this for years. But when something crashes and it doesn't really go your way, it means that you have so many other options now to go. You have a lot more time,
Mhm.
and you have a lot more options to explore because you know that didn't work. So you failed quickly at it. Perfect. Let's move on to the new thing.
Exactly.
And I think building a business really teaches you that. And I want to ask you, from what you built already, because you built already multiple businesses before you started trading.
Mhm.
From that experience, what did it teach you more about risk and money management?
I learned that if you don't if you're not comfortable taking calculated risks, it's very difficult to make any money. To be honest, I think people travel in their car every day and don't realize that there's a 1 in 4 chance they're going to crash their car on the way to work, but they do it because they think the odds are I'm going to get there safely and I'll get paid, or I'll go to a seminar and learn something and grow, and they drive there, right? So they're taking calculated risks all the time without kind of knowing it. It's kind of subconscious, but I was very consciously aware of taking calculated risks. So, and really it kind of, it got heavier and heavier and heavier, like because I had to prove to not just myself, but to my wife and to people around me that I could actually get results. I was someone who did what they said they were going to do. Because if I just said to my wife, I'm going to start trading, from day one, she would have been like, she would have hit the roof. But if I say, look, I'm going to start my own business and just bear with me, we've just had a kid, and she's like, okay, I'll trust you. Don't get me wrong. It was worrying. It was scary. But when you do what you say you're going to do, it reinforces a belief that you can actually do it, right? You get results. So the next time I go with a bigger risk and I say, look, I'm going to get some financing to get to scale this thing a bit bigger. And she's like, oh, are you sure? But she's a little more confident in me at that point than she was last time, right? And then it do it and it pays off. And I think ultimately it's a case of being right more than you're wrong, and having more upside when you're right than downside when you're wrong. And that's a very kind of investor trader way of looking at it. But I think if you just do what you say you're going to do, calculated risks, you become more confident in taking, because you know that they yield results time on time. And plus, people around you see you and respect you for someone who actually does take risks and gets results, and you're not just gambling or being haphazard about it. You're actually taking it seriously, and that gives you a confidence, gives you a reputation in yourself to keep going. And it's just a kind of stair stepping way to higher degrees of calculated risk. But if you don't take risks, you're really going to have a very mediocre life.
How do you build this kind of mental strength to know that you're going to be able to do what you say to everyone else that you can do?
Starting was small and just getting the belief cycle going. So it's like, I'll take this act, I'll make this decision, take this action. Did it work? Yes or no? And then what you do with that yes or no is what then filters back for your next action. And do you improve? Do you grow? And the more you do that, the stronger you become in your mental decision-making process, and your confidence. So I think as long as you are doing that, you're going, that's just how it works. You get stronger beliefs. If I do this, more often than not, it works out. So therefore I'm going to do it again and do it and again and again and again. And as long as you're learning from the kind of failures, as you said, or not failures, but mistakes or things that don't quite go the way that you thought they'd go, and then you're adapting and then overcoming that on the next one, that's growth. I think where people go wrong is they try something, don't give it enough time to come into fruition, don't apply they see it as a setback or a failure, and then they give up and start something else, and then they just go around in circles.
And speaking a lot of your actions actually compounding, you made 12 million from one single YouTube
We
video,
did.
but after 7 years of posting consistently. Can you talk
Yeah.
me through the 7 years? What were they like? What did they teach you? And how did you even figure out what's going to work for you?
Yeah, it was actually, I think it was about 8 years actually. So we've been on YouTube 10 years. Yeah, it was about 7.5 years. Yeah. And funnily enough, like I'm an analyst, so I'm analyst by trade. And after 7.5 years, I thought I better check the analytics of YouTube. I hadn't once checked it. So I'd done it just posting every week, didn't really get amazing results. We got to about 35, 40,000 subscribers after 7.5 years, which was decent. But one week I just said, why don't I just analyze this data in the analytics? So we sat down, me and my son, looked at it all, mapped out some very obvious patterns and things and trends that work and didn't work. And we just came up with this concept that why don't we just try this in this video? And we did that. We launched the video and it went to 8.5 million nearly 9 million views and generated, because the back end of the funnel that we had in that video, it generated $12 million of sales in 10 months, which was phenomenal to see. Like it was the first moment where, I've been investing since I was 22. I've done stock market, I've done real estate investment trust, property, index funds, everything, crypto, startups, angel investment, everything. It was the first time where YouTube overtook everything I'd done in my life. So YouTube is my investment. That is a big investment. And if anyone's watching this, I wouldn't take that with a pinch of salt. I would, use this platform because it's amazing.
You also spoke at AdCon on the same stage with Stephen Bartlett,
Yeah.
Priestley, Abdal. Those people are people that have built massive audiences, either through YouTube or other platforms, before they built massive businesses as well. Would you say that's a blueprint of how people can build businesses today? Focus on building your audience first and then build your business? Or would it be the other way around?
Yeah, I mean, I've never placed an advert in my life. All of my content's organic, and I was asked to speak at AdCon following the success of that video. It kind of blew up. Everyone was like, "What are you doing? You're not placing ads." No, it's all organic. So it became very popular, and then people wanted to hear about how I'd done that. And Daniel Priestley's actually a friend of mine. And he was the guy that said, "You need to share your value, right? Talk to a camera." I'd never spoke to a camera in my life. I was an electrical engineer. I had zero experience public speaking or talking to a camera. And I tried my hand at YouTube. I tried to do this video. It took me 4 hours to do a 4-minute clip. And it's publicly available. It's out there, this recording of me trying to film, and it's just horrific. But he said, if you build it, they come, you find a tribe. And there's a guy called Stuart Wilde back in the 80s and 90s who used to do these money seminars. And he said, the way that he teaches esoteric money or esoteric money concepts is you raise your life force, you become more energy and more power. And then when you do that, people come to you. They're just drawn to you, and they'll find you, and they'll be knocking on your door and crawling under the doors and lowering themselves in through the ceiling and all this kind of stuff. And when they show up, you just have to have a way of billing them, right? And I thought that was great. And I thought, well, let's prove the concept. So when I started YouTube, I didn't need money. So it was from a place of just like, let's share, let's give everything away. And the more I gave away, the more people wanted to pay me. It was incredible, and I think if you build a personal brand, I think it's the most powerful way to have a business, because it gives you power. It gives you, you attract talent, you charge what you want, basically, because there's no comparison. So yeah, I thank Daniel Priestley for kind of pushing me in front of the camera, to be honest.
Especially in these days, honestly, with the amount of AI and disconnection that is going on, I think people do come back for community and authenticity, and having your personal brand, you build so much trust around anything else that you will build
100%.
after that.
I think actually, people worried about doing YouTube and social media and all that, where they're trying to not fluff their words or trying to be perfect in their scripting and all that. I would say now's the time to not do that. You just fluff it up, fluff your words, just muck it up, because the more, I think your edge is going to be in how real you look.
Also, you say that most people are actually closer to financial freedom than they realize, but they focus on the wrong things in life. Can you tell us what are some of these wrong things?
When you're 7 years old, right, you go out and you're playing with your friends on the bike and playing football, climbing trees or whatever, right? And your mum calls you in for bed, and you're like, oh, when I'm an adult, no one's telling me what to do. I'll be free, right? And then as people become adults, they become further and further away from freedom, and less of who they were as that 7-year-old, right? Who's doing things that they're truly inspired to do every day, And there was a moment I was invited on to spend a week on Necker Island with Richard Branson last year, and 40 of these incredible entrepreneurs who are perceived to be at the top of the game. This is the end goal: being on a private island with Richard Branson and private yachts and all this kind of stuff. And I sat there with these 40 entrepreneurs who had all spent their time and money to be on an island, climbing rocks, swimming, playing tennis, dinner time stories, and early bedtimes, right? And I thought, we've always had that. We've always had that, right? So if that's the goal, and after all that success and money, they're choosing to do that, which they always had at 7, you know, there's something to be said for that. That's freedom inside of you, right? You always had that stuff that you're choosing to do. And I think what a lot of entrepreneurs do is they think miraculously one day they're on this train and someday it's all going to work out. It's all going to be fine one day, but they don't actually know where that is or what that looks like or whatever, right? And it's like they're on this train and every now and then there's like a station that they get to and the doors open and it's like, oh, that looks nice, but then they go, oh, I'll just get the next million. I'll just chase the next thing, next thing, next thing, next thing. And then eventually what happens is the train derails, the relationships all over the floor, the money's all over the floor, they have to, and now I just wish I got back there. That looked nice. I would have been happy with that. But they're looking at hindsight as what would have been okay. Whereas I was fortunate enough to have a really great experience with my old mentor, George, when I was about 19. I got in a car one day on the way to work and he said, what car do you want? And I said, I want a Lexus IS200. And he said, how much does it cost? And I said, £260 a month. And he was like, yeah, but how much does it really cost? And I said, I don't know. What do you mean? He said, well, the tires, the MOT, the wear and tear, the insurance, the tax, fuel, all this kind of stuff. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, unless you've priced all that up, you haven't really considered ever having that car. It's just a dream. And I said, okay, what do you suggest I do? And he said, well, go and write down all of that and price it all up. So I did that. And the next day I went in and I said, it's like £600 a month. And he was like, okay, great. Now you know what it actually costs to have that car. And I had like certainty over what an end result would be. But I also realized that I didn't actually value the car at that. So I didn't even want it anymore, right? But anyway, being me, I was obsessed with this. I went home and I did it for everything. I did it for my ideal flat and my shopping bill and how much I'd like to travel and what clothes I'd like. And I itemized my entire perfect life on this spreadsheet. And I took it into him the next day and he said, oh, you don't really want that. You just want that because so-and-so's got it. And I was like, okay. And he said, oh, you don't want that either. And I would cross a few bits off because it wasn't important to me. I just wanted it because someone else wanted it. But at the end of that process, I had this very detailed and accurate cost of what my ideal life would look like. Not just the cost, but what it would actually look like, So when I hit that, I'm not in hindsight. I hit it and then everything's an appreciation after that. It's just like, well, anything that happens after that's a bonus. So this is why when I rock up to Necker Island with all these business people who are still a bit anxious over money and where they're going and chasing, they say, what are your goals? And I say, I've got no goals. I've got no ambitions whatsoever. I'm not hustling. I don't have any goals whatsoever. And they can't quite get their head around it, but it's because I'm content where I'm at because I knew what would make me happy before I got there. And I think there's power in that. Contentment is knowing where you're going and what you would be, knowing when enough is enough.
I think that makes you so happy in life.
So happy.
I have a member of my family, my godmother actually, and she's been quite an inspiration, like the proper way of being a godmother since I was about 18. She's been kind of guiding me and I really like her lifestyle, and not because necessarily of the lifestyle itself, but of her mindset that she has on her lifestyle. And she's told me, look, Michelle, I know what makes me happy and I know what is enough for me in life. And that really lets me appreciate every day that I have. And she built a really nice life for herself. But she's enjoying every moment of it. It's like, why would I need to chase anything else when I'm actually perfectly happy?
Yeah.
But it takes so much of getting to know yourself and what you need in life to actually be at peace with yourself. For me, I think that's the ultimate goal.
Which is why mental freedom is the first step to freedom. Because if you haven't done that process, you don't know where you're going. And you're just trying to buy quick fixes with the next money, with the next car, with the next house, with the next anything, and you just don't actually know when to stop.
So you do speak about these 3 pillars in life, and I do want to ask you more about them. So it would be mental freedom, financial freedom, and time freedom, right?
Yeah.
Is there the specific order for a certain reason, and how do people slowly build on them, and how do we actually get to have all three of them in
Yeah.
life?
So it's mind, movement, and money. So it's mental freedom, mobility freedom, and financial freedom. And the mental freedoms first, which we talked about earlier, knowing who you are and what you actually want in life. The mobility piece is what your calendar looks like and how it's filled with inspiring tasks, based on who you are. Because the more things that you don't want to do, the less inspired you're going to be, and the more it will feel like work. And it's kind of a slavery to something else that isn't who you truly are. So a lot of that comes down to delegation, automations, systems, building a business around who you truly are, and then delegating and automating so that you're just focused on the things you're really good at and the things that you love. And then making it flexible in terms of mobility so that you can do it from anywhere. You can serve people from anywhere. The more mobile you are, the better, the more free you feel. In lockdown, we were all locked inside of our houses, but everyone felt freer because you could choose how you structure your day or what order you do things. So, and then when people were offered the chance to go back to work or stay at home and have a pay cut, there was about 56% of people said that they'd be happy to have a pay cut and stay at home, which says mobility is more important than money, right? So knowing who you are and who you truly are and what you truly want, then building a business and being able to delegate all the things that don't inspire you, that's mobile and relatively passive. And then financial freedom is just how you manage the income from that business that then buys you time should you need to stop. So once you're in a position, this is why I always say freedom really is just doing something you love and being paid for it to cover your lifestyle costs that you truly want. Not lifestyle costs that you're trying to keep up with the Joneses, but like your nan, I think you said, what you actually want, right? That is freedom. The financial piece, you don't want to stop at that point. You're never just going to want to stop ever, right? So the financial freedom is just how much time you can buy into the future based on your living costs if you need to stop, if you have an injury or you have to look after a loved one or something like that. And that comes from how you manage the income. But the beauty of having a business that's aligned with who you are is you'll earn more money doing that than you will doing something you don't want to do. Because there's always a cap. You see these high pressure roles where they go into corporations or they go into a job that doesn't inspire them. They hit a limit where they would just rather do less and earn less. I know a lot of people on sort of maybe in doctors, lawyers, accountants, they hit about 85 grand to 120 grand a year. And the pressure and the responsibility at that level, because it caps out, you can't earn more than that in that role. It caps out. And then at that point, they either have a breakdown or they go, I just want less money and do less. I want to see my family more. Whereas if you're doing a business that you love and you're great at delegating and building systems and teams around what you love, it's infinitely scalable. Like you can earn way more than anyone in a corporate job.
To dial back to what you were saying about Richard Branson and the week that you spent with them, can you tell me what was one of the conversations that actually stuck with you most from that entire week?
I think his philosophy around health and fitness and putting your health first, is probably the biggest takeaway for everyone. And in that week, you'd get up at 5:30 for breakfast, and you'd already had a couple of games of tennis, and then he'd cycle up 1,000-foot mountain. He's a pretty inspiring guy in terms of health and fitness. But he said, when you put your health first and you focus on your health first thing in the morning, the whole day expands. And I think that was a really great quote from him, because he's kind of saying that you might spend 2 hours working on yourself, but once you've put yourself first, everyone around you is better in the day, because you show up as the best version, the best person you can possibly be, by giving yourself permission to put your body first.
You can't pour from an empty bucket.
No.
right?
And what are we doing it for anyway? What are we doing any business or anything for? You want to just live and enjoy the life for as long as possible.
Takes a bit of time to actually get your head around that, I think. A lot of the time society tells you to just put everyone else first and be selfless, and you should to a certain extent, but before you invest in yourself, you can't serve anyone else.
No. There's this hindsight thing as well. Oh, when I get my big payout, when I get to there, then I'll focus on my health. then I'll get fit. When I've got more time, then I'll do that. It's crazy. People put their work, they go to their calendar and they try and fit in their holidays and stuff and their health around their work. What we do on Christmas Eve every year is we put all of our trips and plans in our calendar, and then we work around that. And it makes you work much more effectively, much more efficiently. Put yourself first, and you just get stuff done. It's amazing how productive you are on the times where you're working around your life.
Yes, I love that as well. And I did notice my partner and I travel quite often, and then we do that throughout the year. I know that we have a little getaway at least like once a month for 2 months, but then I know that until my next holiday or my next trip, when I disconnect and I just enjoy life and I find myself inspired again, I have 4 weeks or 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And then I find it a lot easier to calculate what am I spending my time on and how do I do it to be more productive?
Yeah.
Because it's a shorter time frame. I don't do that for 6 months continuously until I know I'm going to be burned out.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and then you need a holiday to get away, right? And
exactly. I rather try to use them to just keep myself inspired and to think about the next steps that I do. And speaking of next steps, your book, Always Free, hit number 1 in 7 countries on its launch day. Congratulations on that, by the way.
Yeah, it was blowing me away.
It's incredible. But can I ask you, what was the hardest part of that entire book to put into words, and why?
It took me 7 years to write that book, and I rewrote it like 2.5 times. The hardest part was some voice in my head saying that I'm not an author. It was my English teacher showed me up in class one day. And it kind of goes back to what I said about, finding your partner cheating on you and sort of stuff. I was in class and we'd just done these SATs, and I thought I'd smashed it. I was a bit cocky. I was a class clown, and he got a few of us to stand up, called our names, and I thought he was going to say, "You guys have smashed it," right? But he said, "You ought to be ashamed. You have not. You are. If you carry on like this, you're going to fail at everything." And I just wanted the world to swallow me up. But I went to the library every lunchtime after that to make sure that I was revising. But I also fell in love with Microsoft Excel, right? And I would build these spreadsheets and do projections and do charts and things like that, right? And then when I came out of school and I went into my work, I would use it to track my money, and I would start using Excel. And then I went on to Microsoft Money, which was a glorified Excel, and I would do these charts for financial freedom and pinpoint the day when I would reach financial independence and things like this. And I tracked all my finances, all my wealth, all my investments. And then to today, I've built tools in Excel that have allowed people to become financially independent. So if I'd have seen that as a bad thing in that moment, right now, if I look back and think of Mr. Shillito, I think, God, what a great guy. I wouldn't be where I am today had he not done that and shown me up in class. But his voice was in my head when I was writing this book. And it was like, I've spoken on lots of stages, I've done TED Talks and all that kind of stuff, but it was something about being an author that I just didn't believe that I had in me.
You had to overcome.
Yeah, I just had to, it took a long time, but in the end, it was just like, let's just get it out. And I'm glad I did.
Speaking for people that starting today, right? For someone that is listening and they are in your shoes before everything started to change, they don't really have money to spend on learning curves. Mm-hmm. What would you say that they should focus first? How they can build the first steps towards their financial freedom?
It is knowing who you are. Like if you don't know what you're doing it for or what you want in life, you'll find it very difficult to build wealth, because every time you accumulate any, you'll be told how to spend it. You'll be told what to spend it on. Or someone's ideas will influence you on, giving it away to something or spending it irrationally instead of investing it for the bigger picture of where you want to go. So it's a bit like, you get on a big farm field and you're on a combine harvester to mow the field. If you just look at the floor, you're going to go kind of all over the place. Whereas if you're just looking at the end, you'll go in a straight line. And I think it's the difference between having an end goal, a bigger picture view, and going in a straight line, rather than letting day-to-day things just swing you off track and kind of get distracted with things that aren't the bigger picture.
And it's a lot of unlearning to do.
A lot, yeah. It is a lot of unlearning because you've been told what to believe, how to think, and it's questioning things like that is a great exercise. Just questioning what you've been told. How does that make you feel? What does that mean to you? How much do you value that? If someone's telling you to do something, take it, synthesize the paradoxes between all these people and go, well, what do I want? And then you can take a pinch of salt there and a pinch of salt there and go, right, I'll take that bit from you, that bit from you, and I believe this, and I'm going to use that this way.
Jason, thank you so much. But before I let you go, can I ask you some fire questions?
Sure.
Trading or business, which one made you free first?
Well, business, because I use the money from business to trade. So trading and investing is kind of a money growing thing, not a money making thing.
Financial freedom, is it an income problem or a discipline problem?
It's a discipline problem. Financial freedom is as simple as trying to lose weight. It's like we all know that we have to eat less calories than we burn to burn fat. Well, to become financially free, you just spend less than what you earn and you invest a surplus, and that's it. And you will become financially free. If you invest 10% of your income at 10% per year for 20 years, you'll match your income.
At what age do you think someone should start learning about money?
From 8 to 10 onwards. Kids don't want to learn about money. You tell a kid that the candle's hot, don't touch it. There's some things they have to touch to learn, because otherwise you just don't appreciate it. And you can't just tell a kid that one day they don't care about financial freedom. They care about climbing rocks and playing football. So they do have to have a little bit of a struggle, but I think they should be aware of what money was created for, instill real beliefs, realistic views on money and what it's there for and how it works. And I think that's a really important lesson to learn, because otherwise you get to 14 and you see your parents struggling and you're just taught money's horrible and evil and it's this dirty thing, which is never going to serve you well.
What's one advice that you would give your younger self?
I would say that, again, my boss, George, shout out to George. He told me that to be in business, you have to be in business, right? And I didn't really know what he meant when he said that because I was very young. But I realized that there's no trick to business. Everyone's winging it. Everyone's trying to figure it out every day. And you just have to keep being in it, because when you're not in it anymore and you give up or you stop, then you're not in it anymore. But the businesses that succeed are the ones that just stayed in it. And as simple as that sounds, I think that's a big, scary part of business for people. They hit walls, they give up, or they get imposter syndrome and things, or they see setbacks as failures. And I think you just have to be in it and keep going.
Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you.